Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Elizabeth Aaron. It's pretty impressive that more and more new content seems to be appearing on Netflix and other streaming platforms at this time, too. Maybe it's just my imagination, but it seemed earlier when we were starting to shelter in place, the movie choices were pretty slim. Now, though, there seems to be a fair amount of new material, fresh stuff, and it's here or it's on its way. So that's great news. And as a result, today we'll be covering some movies that were released for streaming just this month on Netflix. In the first segment, I'll be talking about the movie Work It, which became available for streaming on August 7th. In the second segment, I'll be giving you my thoughts on the movie Gunjan Saxena, the Kargil Girl, which became available on August 12th. In the third segment of the show, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the movie The Sleepover, which became available on August 21st, and then stick around for the end of the show, when I'll be reviewing the movie Night Comes On, which became available just this week on August 27th. Now let's dive on in. As I mentioned in the first segment of the show, I'll be talking about the movie Work It. This is a brand new movie. It was made available to stream on Netflix on August 7th, and that is when the movie was officially released anywhere. It's a new movie here in 2020. It is rated TV-14 because there is some language. It's an hour and 33 minutes long. It's considered a teen movie, a comedy, there's some music in it, and it is a Netflix film. And the Netflix summary of this movie is, a brilliant but clumsy high school senior vows to get into her late father's alma mater by transforming herself and a misfit squad into dance champions. I think that's quite a good sum up. The movie was directed by Laura Taruso, and she is an award-winning director. She won the Audience Choice Narrative for the movie Good Girls Get High in 2018 for the Santa Fe Independent Film Festival. She's known for directing a lot of short movies, and she has also directed a bunch of episodes of the TV series I Want My Phone Back. She also directed the feature Fits and Starts. This movie stars Sabrina Carpenter. She plays our main character, Quinn. She won an award as part of the Best Young Ensemble Feature Film for the movie Horns at the Joey Awards in Vancouver. She's been in a lot of short films and video movies, but other movies include The Short History of the Long Road, The Hate U Give, and Noobs. She was also in an episode of Orange is the New Black. The movie stars Liza Koshy, who plays Quinn's best friend Jazz. She's the winner of a YouTube Creator Award, and she's also won Best Comedy Series and Best Acting in a Comedy for the Streamy Awards in 2018. And that's for the series Liza on Demand. She's been in the movies FML, Tyler Perry's Boo, A Medea Halloween, and she's been in TV series such as Freakish and Escape the Night. And Jordan Fisher is in this movie. He plays Jake Taylor, Quinn's love interest, as well as her dance team's choreographer. He's been in a lot of television shows and television movies. He's been in episodes of such series as The Secret Life of the American Teenager, Teen Wolf, Liv and Maddie, and Archibald's Next Big Thing. At the start of this movie, we see a dance group. These are the Thunderbirds, and they are the reigning champions of a dance competition at the high school where Quinn goes to. We then hear Quinn's voiceover. She's telling us a bit about the dancers and about her life. She talks about how she starts her mornings listening to TED Talks, how she rides with Jazz to school. Jazz picks her up, and Jazz plans to be a professional dancer. By the way, Jazz is short for Jasmine. And she tells us how she is doing everything in her power to ensure that she gets into Duke University, which is her first choice. As it turns out, her father had gone to Duke, and he died when she was 12. He loved it so much, and she was so accustomed to going to events with him there, that she felt it was like a second home to her already, and she couldn't imagine going anywhere else for her higher education. However, the competition is pretty steep. So at the start of the movie, we see the Thunderbirds doing a practice, and they are doing a preparation to get into the Work It Dance competition. They've won before, and they plan to win again, but in particular because the lead dancer knows there's going to be a recruiter from the New York Dance Academy there, and that is where he wants to go. It's also where Jazz wants to go, and it seems like she gets outshined by this dancer. And at this practice of the Thunderbirds, Quinn is managing all of the lighting. And because of a klutzy move of hers, all the lighting essentially blows up. That means they're going to be in trouble when it comes to fulfilling practices going forward. As a result, the lead dancer fires Quinn. She's no longer allowed to manage the lighting or come anywhere near the dancers. Yet not long after this, she has her interview with the admissions department at Duke. And when push comes to shove, she feels she has to do something that's going to really impress them, and she ends up saying that she is a dancer that's going to be competing at the Work It competition. And yet, dancing is not her forte, so she's got herself in a little bit of a bind. She convinces Jazz to teach her how to dance, so in 2 weeks she can audition for the Thunderbirds to see if she can be a member of their group. As it turns out, the Thunderbirds only have room for one new person, and Quinn pretty much falls short of expectations. Willing to do anything to get into Duke, she gets the idea from that audition to form her own dance group and see if they can do better at the competition at Work It, because that's where the admissions person says she is going to be and is looking forward to seeing Quinn dance. Quinn recruits Jazz to help her form the team and to be on the team. And from this point forward, there is a big adventure in getting this team off the ground, figuring out if they're going to be able to harness their skills in such a way that they will be able to dance really well in this competition and hopefully win. And although Quinn is not very talented as a dancer, she does know her stuff. She's a great organizer, a project manager, she's really smart. Through a bunch of research, she discovers all the things that are necessary in order for this team to be a competitive team. That includes finding a great choreographer. She locates someone whose team had won the competition in the past and found out that he has an injury and he hasn't been seen around much. So she approaches him to see if he will be their choreographer. At first he's resistant, but what he ultimately says is if they can pass the first leg of the competition and get in, then he will move on to be their full-time choreographer. Needless to say, the group that Quinn has formed gets in by the skin of their teeth. And Jake Taylor, this choreographer, comes on board. Now Quinn and Jake start forming a romantic bond, and it's really sweet to see. At first we saw them in more of a conflict, and he got more and more impressed by what she was doing. And he was helping her try to deal with some of her issues around dancing, because she was pretty stiff and really finding it hard to get out of her own head and into her body so that she could just let her body flow to whatever music was playing. But there were plenty of snafus along the way, and ups and downs with this group, ups and downs in terms of how Quinn was going to participate, because her grades started suffering as she got more involved with this dance group. And she was loving the dance group and finding creativity and purpose and connection with these others in ways that she never has before. And she is really growing and changing and loving all of it. She also feels really committed to the group. That is until her mother gets wind of her grades taking sort of a nosedive and possibly ruining her chances to getting into Duke. And while getting into Duke was Quinn's dream, it was also a dream for her mother. Together, this is something that they've been working towards and making sure that this dream of theirs comes true. But with this, Quinn learns a big lesson about what commitment means. Here she had gotten this group together, and she was getting ready to bow out because she wanted to keep her commitment to her mother. This created a setback in her friendship and her relationships with everyone in the group, and with Jake. With this learning, she finds a way to turn it around. And there's another wrinkle to keep us on our toes, which is the person that Quinn had interviewed with at Duke in the admissions department had left her job. She was moving to another school, and as a result, Quinn's need to be in this dance competition suddenly seemed to go out the window. In any case, we go on this wild ride with Quinn and her friends, and I will not reveal what happens at the end. I will say, however, overall this movie is a pretty upbeat movie. The acting is fun and quick, and there's some good chemistry between the characters. I also appreciate that Quinn is a problem solver, and she's a risk taker. She doesn't have a whole lot of dance experience, or ability for that matter, and yet she is willing to dive in and do this, not give up, and she recognizes the power in numbers and having people who are experts who can help along the way. All of that, I think, is great role modeling, especially for kids, to see how to get something done. And the story is a fun story. It's not very deep. The story doesn't take itself seriously. And I think none of these actors are known actors, so I think they did a good job in making the story happen. That all said, there are some things about this movie I absolutely hated. Really, I just felt there was no excuse for including these things in there. They were not necessary. For example, one of Quinn's extracurricular activities is being a volunteer at a local nursing home. At one point, when her dance group needs a place to practice dancing, well, the solution is the nursing home. There's an open space. But they also wanted to test their audition in front of an audience and see what their response was. So they thought, oh, well, this would work out great. They can do this for the seniors and entertain them. Turns out there's a very popular movie playing, and there's only one senior who is available to be the audience. He's an elderly gentleman who seems as if he may have had a stroke. He is in a wheelchair. Something happens as a result of this gentleman seeing the performance, and I'm not going to spoil it. But I will say is the way he was used, I felt was awful. It was ageist, it looked down on him, it made fun of him. Frankly, I'm even surprised the actor was willing to do the role. Now, there's another example when the team is trying to qualify to get into the competition. This is another competition in its own right, and they have to place towards the top in order to be able to move forward and go to work it. Their hope is that the team that follows them is worse than they are, because if that's the case, they'll be a shoo-in to have their space. The team that does come after them seems to be pretty good, but something happens that disqualifies them. I will not state what that is, but I will say that it was raunchy, in poor taste. I felt it sent a negative message to young men, and I didn't find it funny. Instead, I actually found it pretty disturbing. And there is yet another example. There is a point where Jazz and Quinn are sitting outside a mattress store, and Jazz looks in and she sees a very attractive salesman. At one point, when she recognizes that Quinn is interested in Jake Taylor, but Quinn doesn't really know how to approach Jake Taylor to let him know that she's interested, Jazz takes her into this mattress shop and aims to show her how it is done by coming on to the salesperson. Now first, I think she is probably underage. And second, the way that she does it, again, I found disturbing. I didn't feel it was sending the right kind of message to young women about how they could connect with a man that they find attractive. In and of themselves, these scenes could be funny. I get that, but my feeling is that the negative message outweighs the humor in each of these scenes. However, there were some genuinely funny scenes. I loved the scene with Quinn talking to the admissions person. The admissions person was a little bit nutty, and she really wanted Quinn to push the envelope to show how she was different and creative. When Quinn listed out all of the things that she felt separated her from the other candidates, the admissions person threw a bunch of file folders right in front of Quinn and said, they all have the same exact experience. That seemed pretty ludicrous. And I felt the opening really set a great tone for the comedy, especially with Quinn spilling the coffee on the lighting console, and then just talking about her all-around quirkiness, like listening to TED Talks first thing every morning. Something that I am not really sure worked very well is Quinn and Jake as a couple. There were some really sweet scenes, and that is true, yet I didn't find much chemistry between them. I wanted to, but there wasn't a lot there. They're an interracial couple, and I don't think that makes a difference. In fact, I loved that they just appreciated each other's differences and that wasn't an issue for them at all. And the one thing that really did seem to bond them was that Jake was able to finally connect Quinn to her body, get her out of her head, so that she could discover how to dance. But I guess what I'll say about that is All the elements were there for them to have a nice romantic connection that was believable. I think it was probably great in the script, on paper, but somehow it didn't come off the page onto the screen very effectively. This movie was quite formulaic. There's this dance competition, and Quinn, who has no dance experience, and her team, which has never danced together, they need to pull a rabbit out of a hat in order to get into the competition and hopefully win it. And there is a love story that comes as a result of the dancing. And there's the idea that there is a parent who is going to come between the daughter and what she wants to do. Those are things I've seen over and over and over. Now, there were some unique twists with regard to this story. Was it anything really special? No. And now this movie was rated TV-14 because of language in particular. I would say that there are more things than that to be cautious of in this movie. I would say this was a pretty juvenile movie, pretty immature, and there will be some things in this movie that either the kids are precocious and know their way around the block and will get it, or it will bring up some questions and potential issues that the parents will want to explain to their child. That is, assuming they're seeing it together. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a most excellent movie, how would I rate this movie? I'd give it a 4. For what it was in many regards, it was well done. It was put together well. There weren't a lot of holes in the movie. The acting was pretty good. The dancing wasn't bad either. The music was fun. But I felt it wasn't socially conscious. And I just feel there isn't an excuse today for any movie to have some poor role modeling. I felt in places where this movie was trying to be funny, ultimately made me lose some respect for the movie. Now stay tuned for the next segment of the show when I'll be looking at the movie Gunjan Saxena, The Kargil Girl, after the break.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. It keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Thanks for joining for the second segment of the show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aaron, and in the last segment, I talked about the movie Work It. I'm now going to discuss the movie Gunjan Saxena, The Kargil Girl. This is a new movie. It was just released in the United States on August 12th on Netflix. This movie is rated TV-14, and it's interesting. The reason it's rated for that is fear. And I think that is a fascinating reason. Usually it's language or smoking or something like that. So, fear is it. This is a longer movie. It's an hour and 52 minutes. It has subtitles. I will say that the subtitles did not interfere with my enjoyment of this movie. In fact, often I didn't even realize I was reading the subtitles. I was so involved in the movie. So that's something to keep in mind. And this is inspired by a true story. It's inspired by the life of a fearless young officer who made history by becoming the first Indian female Air Force officer to fly in a combat zone during the 1999 Kargil War. And that is Netflix's summary of this movie. I should say that it is an Indian movie, that may go without saying, but it is also a Hindi language movie, which is why there are subtitles. The director of this movie is Sharan Sharma. Based on her filmography on the Internet Movie Database, she has served as miscellaneous crew members on film crews. She's been an associate director and a director's assistant. This movie, however, is her first movie as a feature film director. This movie stars the actress Janvi Kapoor. It looks like she has some experience in possibly modeling or glamour, but in terms of her movies, she has won some awards. For the movie Dadak, she won Best Debut Actor for the Lions Gold Awards and Best Debut Actress for the Zee Cine Awards. Most of her acting seems to have taken place within the last 2 years, and she's been in the movies Ghost Stories and Bombay Girl, among others. And in this movie, she is playing our lead character, Gunjan Saxena. The actor Pankaj Tripathi was also in this movie. He has won some awards, including the Best Actor Award for the Cape Town and Winelands International Film Festival in South Africa for the movie Mango Dreams. And he also won Best Supporting Actor for the same movie at the Dadasaheb Phalke Film Festival. And he won a Best Supporting Actor Award for the movie Stree at the Screen Awards in India. In this movie, he plays Colonel Anup Saxena. He is the father of our protagonist. And I'd also like to mention another actor that's in this movie, and it's Angad Bedi. He plays Anshuman Saxena. He is Gunjan's brother. It looks like he's probably mostly been in Indian movies, but some of the titles include Pink, Tiger Zinda Hai, and The Zoya Factor. The very opening of this movie, even before there are any credits shown or any of the story begins, there's a screen that essentially says that this is based on a true story and that certain things have been changed just for dramatic purposes. I appreciated the honesty that was upfront about this. I'm a big fan of biographical movies or movies based on real life, and I often wonder how much is real, how much isn't, how much creative license was taken with it, and what can I really believe? Simply based on the fact that this message is there. As a viewer of this movie, I already have a certain level of trust that the director, the writers, are taking great care with this story and doing their best to present it in a way that as a viewer, I can trust it. The movie begins with a scene that is going to spur a flashback. There are a group of soldiers walking in a valley in the Kargil area of India. Soon they get shot at, and they need help. They need to get the wounded people out of there as soon as they can. However, the commander is in a tight spot. The majority of the helicopter pilots that would normally fly in to help these soldiers that were shot down are on another mission, and there's only one pilot available to help, and that is Gunjan. She has proven herself to be a very capable pilot. And yet what we learn throughout the movie is how controversial it is that this is a woman who's doing this work. So in the opening, we see her run to her helicopter and take off. By the way, this war is happening in 1999. After that, we go back to where the story begins. And that happens to be 15 years earlier. She's a young girl on an airplane sitting next to her brother. Her brother has a window seat. And she is dying to look out the window at the land below and at the clouds. Yet her brother has the window shade pulled down. She keeps trying to put it up, and finally he's just had it and he said to stop. She clearly feels shut down. However, the good news for her is that the flight attendant saw what happened. She asks Gunjan to follow her, and she takes her to the cockpit, where she gets to see the pilots doing their work and to play with some controls to help fly the plane. Well, this is it for her. This is like nirvana. She is enthralled, and she decides right there and then that she is going to be a pilot. In the next scene, we see her wearing the goggles of a pilot. She's sitting at the table with her brother. They're eating breakfast, and her brother just makes fun of her and says girls cannot be pilots. They can serve drinks and food in the cabin, but they are not the ones who should be flying the plane. In comes their father, and he essentially says, whatever Gunjan wants to be, she can be. As long as she sets her mind to it, she can be anything that she chooses. With this, at last, Gunjan has the upper hand, and this sets up what is going to happen in the rest of the story. She's determined to be a pilot, and it is quite a journey for her to do this. We see as a child, she will do anything to watch planes, to learn about planes, to play with models. She's very into them. When she becomes a young adult, she earns very good scores in school, and she decides she wants to go to pilot school. And she also knows this will not go over very well with her family. They're going to want her to get a college education. They're not the wealthiest family, and college education is something that is a privilege. In particular, her mother wants her to get a college education, and her mother wants her to have a traditional life. She wants her to get married and have a family. Yet her father is a bit more forward-thinking than that. He's quite a woman's advocate, and he understands what the kind of impact will be on all women in India if Gunjan does indeed follow her dream and become a pilot. So after much trying, with the support of her father, she decides that she is going to go to pilot school, and she goes on an interview to get into the school, and she keeps coming up against barriers in order to do this. Whether its qualifications have changed, or the amount of money to get the degree has changed. After spending years of fulfilling all the obligations in order to get into this program, it finally becomes clear that that is not the route she's going to be able to go in. She's pretty down and out about this, yet next thing you know, she's waking up in the morning and finds a sheet of newspaper next to her. She goes to her father and asks him why he put this newspaper there. There's some kind of political issue that is being discussed in the paper, and she doesn't understand what that's about. He opens up the page, and there's a big advertisement asking women to apply to be an Air Force pilot. Here, Gunjan learns that sometimes the path to get to do what you want may not always look like you thought it would. So she goes into the program, and she succeeds in moving forward to becoming a pilot, but there are a few areas where she is lacking in qualifications. Once again, she's put in all this work, and she feels like she's failed again. But with her father's help, she gets to see beyond the barriers that she's coming across and comes up with some interesting ways to work around it so that she can qualify to be an Air Force pilot. So she goes through the rigor of getting her training, and then she's ready for duty. At the location where she is sent to do her pilot training, there are no other women. There are no facilities for women. And the men don't know what to do with her. They don't know how to act around her. They just end up kind of ignoring her because that's the easiest thing for them to do. As a result, she's feeling isolated. She's not getting her training hours in because none of the men want to fly with her, and there are all kinds of excuses that come up about why they can't do the work with her. And finally, there is a military leader there who sees what is happening, and he decides he's going to train her. And she keeps meeting him where he is at. He's very impressed with her over time, and she ends up becoming a rising star. It is not without hardship. She has to keep her eyes open everywhere she looks. And the men seem to be out to get her, including the commander who is directly supervising her. There's one very important scene where she is finally at the top of her power. She's fought so hard to get to this place with these other Air Force pilots when this commander essentially breaks her in front of everybody. At long last, she has had it. She's tired of the way these men are treating her, and she at last finds her voice and tells them no, this is her chance to say what she has to say. And she lays out there what she sees is going on. And she makes it clear that it is their loss that they are treating her this way and not taking advantage of the skills that she has to offer. With this, she opts to leave. She's not sure she'll ever go back. She thinks hard and long about what she wants to do. And once again, her father is there to help mentor her. He gives her a dose of reality, and there is this really wonderful scene. The way that he does it is essentially he paints a picture as to what does she want her life to look like. Does she want to really have the life that her mother wanted for her, the traditional woman's life, or is there something more? He and Gunjan clearly have a very special relationship. She can really rely on him. He gets her, and she knows it. She feels really loved by him. He mentors her tremendously and really believes in her. And interestingly, the brother and the father have a bit of a rocky relationship. They struggle, and the brother thinks that maybe Gunjan is getting some extra attention and extra care, and he doesn't understand why. He also thinks that the father may be a bit reckless when it comes to Gunjan, thinking that ultimately the father is putting Gunjan in harm's way and that he has a blind spot with regard to that. Well, Gunjan decides what she has to do. Not a surprise because we know this is based on real life and what is going to happen because she ends up doing work in the Kargil War. Now, something that I expect is probably part of the dramatic license that was mentioned at the beginning of the movie is that when she is actually in a war zone, her brother happens to be there as well. Now, this could have seemed a little bit hokey, but I think it was actually a very wise decision because putting them juxtaposed to each other and having the brother witness what she is doing helps really paint the story very clearly. We also get to see, well, who was right? Was the father right or was the brother right in terms of what in terms of what Gunjan's capabilities are. Now, the last stretch of the movie picks up where the movie began. Gunjan is running to her helicopter, and she is ready to go and help rescue the soldiers that have been wounded. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to spoil what happened, but I will say what happens is very important to Gunjan and what happens in her career after that. I really enjoyed this movie. It was really inspiring. And personally, I love stories where we see a person who has to step outside their comfort zone and grow. And because she has this passion for flying, she is going to do anything she can to get to the goal that she has set for herself. I also love the fact that she had to be flexible about what her dream was going to look like. She knew she wanted to fly. Originally, she envisioned that she was going to fly airplanes, probably commercial liners. And the reality was, she ended up being in the Air Force and flying helicopters. She also had a tremendous number of obstacles to overcome, and with her father's help especially, she pretty much was able to do it. And often the way she did it was quite creative. One of my favorite parts of the movie is when she goes into the training to see if she can qualify to become an Air Force pilot. She proves herself to be smart, shows herself to think creatively and have unique ways to deal with the situations that they are put in, and there's even quite a bit of humor in this section. This section allows her to be compared to other women who are also trying to become an Air Force pilot. One little snippet to look out for is there is a point where the commander there is putting all the women through a test. And that test is having them get up on a table, and it's right by a big open window, and he's telling them to jump. It is clear that if they jump out that window, they are going to get injured. All of the women are complaining about this, yet Gunjan comes with a creative solution. I'm not going to share what it is, just be on the lookout for it. Something else I really appreciate about this movie is it really is about women, and women's strength, and what women are capable of. And it's not only that they're capable of doing a job that men can do, but they're capable of overcoming the limitations that others can place on them and still prove themselves strong. In this movie, it seemed to me mostly to be a drama, and yet there are some moments that are really comedic, and to show that, the director included some music that was very comedic and lighthearted when these situations happened. I thought that was a really interesting choice, and I appreciated it because it helped lighten up some of the harder moments. Overall, I felt this movie was well done. I didn't really find any holes. I would say, if anything, I had a little bit of an issue with the brother when he was an adult. The first time we met him, it was unclear to me that he was indeed the brother. He had asked Gunjan to dance, so I thought it might have been some kind of love interest or a boyfriend. We hadn't yet seen the transition of how the brother was as a child to being more of an adult. And as an adult, he was a very well-developed adult. He clearly had been in the military and was very buff, and it seemed odd to me in a way. I think I would have wanted to see some transitional version of the brother prior to that. Yet that is pretty minor. I felt Janvi Kapoor did a great job as the lead actress. She was in just about every scene. That is a tall order, and I felt she did a very consistent job. Also, as I mentioned on the Internet Movie Database, it appears that she is a glamour queen, per se, in India, and she played a very down-to-earth character who was not super glamorous. And I found that refreshing. And I have to say, I've just been really impressed with a lot of the movies coming out of India these days. If you've listened to my other podcast sessions, you may recall that I reviewed Ye Ballet, which is another Indian movie that was just fantastic. And I feel their storylines are really strong, and that is absolutely no exception with this movie. So I would highly recommend this movie. I think it's entertaining, it's a great story you can get wrapped up in. I find myself just constantly wanting to see what was going to happen next. How is she going to get out of a situation or make the most of a situation? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a most excellent movie, I really can't see any reason not to give it a 10. I've been handing 10s out rather liberally these days, but I think there are some movies that really deserve them. In early August, there was an article by Jack Scharf in IndieWire, and its title was, "Do Film Critics Need Filmmaking Experience? John Cleese Says It's Odd Most Can't Act or Direct." While I haven't directed a lot, I definitely have acting experience and writing experience, and I know it's hard work. So when a story is really told well, I'm more likely to give it a 10 because credit is due. Now stay tuned for the next segment of the show, and I'll be looking at the movie The Sleepover after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome to the third segment of the show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aaron, and I talked about the movie Gunjan Saxena, the Kargil Girl in the last segment. I'm now going to discuss the movie The Sleepover. This movie came out on August 21st of this year, so it is very recent. It is an hour and 43 minutes long. It is considered a family movie, and it is an action-adventure movie. And on a personal note, this movie takes place on Cape Cod and in Boston. And I am a New Englander from these places, so I really appreciate that these are the locations. It made it extra fun for me to watch. The summary that Netflix has of this movie is, what do you do if your parents are kidnapped by a crew of international thieves? You begin a wild overnight adventure, complete with spy gear. This kind of captures what happens in the movie. When someone gets kidnapped, usually it's against their will. In this case, the mother was not necessarily kidnapped completely against her will. The director of this movie is Trish C., and she won a Grammy, of all things, for Best Short Form Music Video for OK Go, Here It Goes Again. It looks like a lot of her filmography, based on the Internet Movie Database, is video shorts. She did direct the movie Step Up All In, and she directed Pitch Perfect 3. Now, the mom in this movie is played by Malin Ackerman. Her character's name is Margot, and she is a nominee for Best Supporting Actress for the movie Watchmen by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films USA. Other movies she's been in include Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, Couples Retreat, The Giant Mechanical Man, and A Piece of My Heart. The dad, Ron, is played by Ken Marino. He has been nominated for Primetime Emmy Awards, most recently for Outstanding Short Format Live Action Entertainment Program for Children's Hospital. And he has mostly been in television. He has appeared in episodes of Veronica Mars, Fresh Off the Boat, and Black Monday. And this movie stars Joe Manganiello. He won Best Guest Performance in a television series, True Blood, at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films USA. And he won for the same role, Breakout Performance Male, for the Scream Awards. He's also been in a lot of television, including One Tree Hill, How I Met Your Mother, and Big Bang Theory. Another actor I want to give a shout out to is Harry Aspinwall. He happens to be a friend of an acquaintance of mine, so it's great to see that he was listed on the cast. In this movie, he plays Baxter, or the pizza guy. He's been in quite a few short movies, but he has been in the feature films The Actor and The Wedding. And the child actors had major roles in this movie. Sadie Stanley has been in a bunch of television, including Dead to Me and The Goldbergs. She plays the daughter Clancy in this movie. Maxwell Simpkins, who plays the son Kevin in this movie, has also been in quite a bit of television. He's been in the shows Bizaardvark, Kim Hushable, and The Mighty Ducks. Craig Ticino, who plays the kid's friend Mim, has been in the TV series Game Shakers and Mr. Iglesias. And lastly, Lucas J., who plays Lewis, has been in Pure Genius, Fuller House, and Merry Happy Whatever, all television series. And this movie has a rather elaborate setup at the beginning, and I think it works quite well. In the opening, Kevin Finch, the son in the Finch family, is in front of a classroom talking about his family. He has a vast imagination and is sharing a story about his grandfather that looks quite like the plot of the movie The Martian. His teacher calls him on this, and eventually reports to his parents that his imagination is running away, and that it's important that he come back to Earth and give a more grounded story. Now, this is a setup for the fact that something wild is about to happen this weekend, and it could be that Kevin's idea of imagination is not so far from the truth after all. Shortly after Kevin gives his talk, he goes into the restroom and he believes he's alone, and he does an entire dance routine. It's really fun, and unbeknownst to him, there actually is someone hiding in a stall filming the whole thing on their cell phone. Next, we get to meet Clancy more close up. So Clancy Finch is known as kind of a nerd, and there's a particular guy she likes, and it seems like he likes her. He's having a big party and asks for her number so that he can tell her how she can make it there. Well, she doesn't have a phone. Her mother won't let her have one. And for her, this is pretty humiliating. After this, we get to see her in band practice, and she is a cellist. She is very talented. And her teacher is encouraging her to apply for a Berklee Music Summer Program in Boston, which is a big deal. But as good as a player as she is, she seems to be lacking confidence in being able to do this, and she's pretty scared to perform in front of people. At school, we also get to know a little bit about the mother. Mrs. Finch happens to be a monitor at lunchtime, and Kevin, her son, is being chased by these bullies, one of whom is the one who took the video footage and is teasing him about it. Well, his mother protects him, sends him off, and she has a few choice words with this group of bullies. She puts them in their place. We don't know at this point that she is indeed Kevin's mother. But what we do find out is that his mother doesn't quite appear to be a typical mother. And at the end of the school day, Kevin and Clancy and their friend Mim pile into the minivan that the dad drives. Mr. Finch is really kind of funny, dorky guy. He is a pastry chef, and he has these little clamps that he uses to exercise his fingers so that he is more powerfully able to knead dough. And Mim is Clancy's best friend and very close to the family, and she's the one who seems to have street smarts. She can work her way around anybody, adult or child. All of these characters are really well painted from the start, so we have a pretty good sense of what we're going to be expecting from them. And a little bit later, we get to meet Lewis. He is the one who is going to be sleeping over. Hence the title, The Sleepover. Lewis has a very overprotective mother, and he also has a bit of a bladder problem when it comes to sleeping through the night. And his mother further embarrasses him more than helps him when it comes to this problem in terms of the sleepover happening. Now, during this night of the sleepover, something unexpected happens. The house gets broken into by, as it turns out, people who were in the past life of Mrs. Finch, the mom. Two people come to threaten Mrs. Finch and Mr. Finch, and they're going to take them hostage, but it doesn't happen without Mrs. Finch's ultimate permission. They're essentially given an ultimatum, but Mrs. Finch agrees. However, before she gets knocked out and she knows this is what's going to happen to her, she leaves some clues. While this is happening, Lewis happens to be in the bathroom, and he peeks out, and unbeknownst to everyone, he gets a glimpse of all the action that's happening. When the parents are taken and things are safe, he runs and tells all the other kids. And shortly after, when they're trying to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to find their parents, somebody comes into the home. It's a man named Henry, and he identifies himself as a U.S. Marshal. But not trusting him, the kids have managed to tie him up. And they do it in a very special way, and I'm just going to give you a heads up to look out for it because it's really funny. Meanwhile, as Henry tries to tell them more about what's going on with the situation, revealing that they don't necessarily know everything about their mother, and that there are some surprises, the kids find the clues that the mother had left, and they start piecing things together and being led from one clue to the next, and they decide to set out on an adventure to find their parents and get them back safe and sound. This adventure involves going to a number of different places, including a storage area, the party that Clancy had wanted to go to in the first place. It involves some secret passageways and some travel. And in all of these cases, each of the kids ends up having to face something that they're fearful of and overcome it. Or at least try. Meanwhile, as the kid's story plays out, we are toggled back and forth between their story and the parent's story. Ron, or Mr. Finch, learns more about his wife than he ever knew before. She has some secrets in her closet. She, it turns out, was quite a talented criminal. I won't give away what kind of crime she used to do, but with being taken hostage, she is brought to meet up with her old fiancé. This was news to Ron, and there's a whole scenario about how this threesome ends up working things out amongst each other that's really funny. Ron is also doubting whether his wife really loves him. It's driven home to him that perhaps he was just part of a cover-up for her. We learn that they're kidnapped because she's an expert at what she does, and there's this one crime that's a creme de la creme kind of crime that they want her to help them pull off. It will take place that night in Boston. So we see these two parallel stories. We see the children making their way towards Boston, and then we see Mrs. Finch and her husband and her fiancé and this group of criminals also making their way towards Boston. And the question is, are they going to indeed meet up? And if they do, or when they do, what will indeed transpire? This movie does keep you on your toes, always wondering what is going to happen next. There are a lot of surprises, and in so many ways, this is an action-adventure movie, and it is a mystery, and everything is done in a comedic way. So there's a lot of fun here. I felt that the acting was quite good. There are times that it was over the top, but it is a comedy, and I felt that it was not necessarily uncalled for. Some of the ploys were not super believable. For example, the U.S. Marshal that came into their home, that the fact that the kids were able to tie him up and that he wasn't able to get free, that was a little far-fetched for me. There were a few other things like that as well. There is also some fight scenes, and these move pretty slowly by comparison of a lot of action-adventure movies, but this does involve children, and I felt that was a reasonable thing too. So most things are pretty positive. There are some things, however, that I do take issue with. I think one point of this movie is to show that there are strong women, and Mrs. Finch is certainly one of them. She has this sort of hidden past where she was a successful criminal. But I just think it's too bad that she had to be a criminal to show up and be this cool mom. In some ways, I felt this movie was trying to take the theme of the hit TV show The Americans and turn it on its head so that it was more geared towards children. But I don't think it's a great message for children to think that maybe underneath it, their mom could be a criminal. Later in the movie, the mom does things like hotwire a car that she doesn't want her children to do, and she tells them, don't ever do this. Well, I think it's in poor taste to have a mother actually do something that is not something that she would want her children to do. I expect children do get to see their parents do certain things that show their humanity, and they're not perfect, but this is a choice that this mom makes, and I think it pushes the envelope a little bit too far. Also, once the mom sees her ex-fiancé and they get together, she sits on the couch next to him as opposed to with her husband, who's sitting across from them. And I felt that she should have shown her husband some level of support there. There's also a point where Kevin and Lewis are playing with weapons, and they are not supervised. And some not so good things happen as a result. They didn't get hurt, but they could have. And I don't think it's a good idea to show anybody, any children, playing with any kinds of weapons. I don't think this movie drove home the point that playing with these weapons is really dangerous. The weapons did do dangerous things, but it was done in a comedic way. And I felt that that was irresponsible. There's also a point where we see Clancy drive a car, and she doesn't have her license yet. In some ways, you could say she's taking after her mom, but that's not the kind of thing you want a child to take after. Something else that I didn't completely buy is that there were a lot of clues that were left, and the kids seemed to stumble upon the answers to these clues with hardly any work. Once in a while, something might take a little bit longer, but then they'd happen upon what the solution was. All of this happened way too easily in my book. It wasn't very believable. It did move the story along quickly, and it being a comedy, well, maybe there is some leeway there. It certainly did feel like this movie was trying to pack an awful lot into a short amount of time. And based on that, for production reasons, they probably had to make it happen that way. Still, it was a little bit out of left field for me. Overall, I felt this was a fun ensemble cast. I felt the story was a fun story. A lot of interesting things happened. And I was kept on my toes. And I know a lot of children seeing this are really smart. They know that this is not real. But I do think on certain levels, some of the messages that came across in this movie are just not very positive for children. And that should definitely be taken into consideration if it is going to be a movie that is seen with the entire family. And kids should be protected. And I think definitely not to see this movie alone. I think it would be helpful for parents to supervise and to explain about the dangers of weapons, not driving with a license, some of these things that came up in the movie, just to be sure that the appropriate message is given. So I would recommend this movie, but with some caution. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most excellent movie, I would rate this a 6. It definitely felt like a kid's movie, and as a result, as an adult watching it, I did not feel super involved and enthralled the way I think I would if I were a child. If I were a child, I think I probably would have felt like, wow, how cool is that? To have a mom who has this interesting history and to get involved in this big adventure. I'd want to live through that vicariously. But the adult in me certainly is questioning what would a child need to see in order for them to live through something vicariously and feel special? Does it have to be something that is crime-oriented or breaking the rules-oriented? I think there's a time and a place for the rules to be broken, and when it was modeled in this comedy the way that it was, I think it should be second-guessed. Now stay tuned for the final segment of the show when I'll be sharing my thoughts on the movie Night Comes On.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome to the final segment of the show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aaron. And in the last segment, I talked about the movie The Sleepover. I'm now going to discuss the movie Night Comes On. This movie came out in 2018, but it is new on Netflix just this past week. August 27th is when it arrived. It is rated TVMA, meaning it's for mature audiences because of language. It's an hour and 26 minutes long. It's a drama and deals with social issues. This movie is the co-winner of the Next Innovator Award at the Sundance Film Festival. And the Netflix description of this movie is, a teen fresh out of juvenile detention tries to rescue her sister from foster care in order to exact revenge on their father for their mother's murder. This movie has won a number of other awards. It won the acting prize for the Chérie Chérie Festival, and this is for the two main actresses, Dominique Fishback and Tatum Marilyn Hall. It also won the jury prize at the Deauville Film Festival for the director, Jordana Spiro, and it won the audience award at the Lighthouse International Film Festival for Best Narrative Feature. It actually won the jury award for that same festival as well, and it was the winner for the Best First Feature Film at the Melbourne Queer Film Festival. And in fact, it has won other awards at other film festivals as well, so it is quite the film festival winner. The director of this movie is Jordana Spiro. She co-wrote this movie with Angelica Nwandu. She has won a number of directing awards. She won Best Director for a short film at the Downtown Film Festival, Los Angeles for the movie Skin, and this film also won the Best Short Film for the Fort Myers Film Festival, and she's also won, it looks like, an acting award, Outstanding Female Lead in a Comedy Series for My Boys for the Gracie Allen Awards. And while she's mostly known for her acting, she has directed 3 short films before doing Night Comes On, which is her first feature film. The main character in this movie is Angel Lemire, and Dominique Fishback is the character who plays her. She's also in another big Netflix movie right now, out just this year, called Project Power. She's been in quite a bit of television. She's been seen in episodes of The Americans, Blue Bloods, Show Me a Hero, and she was also in the movie The Hate You Give. Tatum Marilyn Hall plays the sister Abby, and it appears this was her first acting role. She has also since been in Wu-Tang: An American Saga, one episode of that TV series. This movie has a lot going on, and it's a lot that's going on under the surface. The main character, Angel, is getting out of juvenile hall, and she has to make her way in the world. One challenge for a lot of movies is to figure out how to share information with the audience without being heavy-handed about it. In real life, information is not always just stated. Little bits and pieces of information tend to be scattered throughout time. This is how we learn about people. Sometimes you can know someone for years, and then you hear a story about them, and your view of them completely changes. And you had no idea after all this time that there was something more to them. This happens all the time, and so in a movie, to be convincing, it's important to paint a picture in this particular way. It's more natural. I think it's fascinating with this movie, the way that a lot of information was given right up front in a way that is potentially seen as heavy-handed, but it didn't come across that way at all. Angel is meeting with a judge, some other support people, probably a lawyer and a social worker. Their roles are not all clear, but they're talking about her case, about what she's done, how she ended up in juvenile hall, what her family's history is. We find out that she was in foster care for a long time and not always in very good situations. And we also know that she doesn't have a place to go to stay, and that she has a sister who is still in foster care, who's younger than her. And throughout the time that this case is being discussed, the camera is frequently on Angel. We get to see what her reaction is to hearing all this information about her, as if in some way she's not even sitting there, like everybody is talking around her. And there's nothing personal in what is being said, and yet every piece is very personal. So when Angel gets out of juvenile hall, she has to figure out how she's going to survive. The first thing she wants to do is check her phone, which she has not had on her for however long she's been in juvenile hall, which I believe was at least a year. And she ends up going into some stores, asks if anyone has a charger. This is our first glimpse of how she deals with the outside world, and it's very fascinating. It's clear that she comes from the school of hard knocks. By the way, this is based in Philadelphia, so for anyone from that area, this movie might hold some special value for you. She finally does get her phone charged, and you'd think that the first thing she'd want to do is figure out exactly where she's going to stay. She's under the assumption that she may be staying at her girlfriend's, but she's not able to reach her. So she goes to a house, and at first it seems like maybe this is another foster home, or it's not completely clear. What we learn is through some connections, she's meeting up with someone who sells weapons. And she is determined to get revenge on her father, and she wants to get a gun and do that. I won't go into the details of what transpires. I will say during the interaction with this man, there's definitely some things that are upsetting that happen. As hard as the scene is, the acting is great. Moment by moment, we're not sure what's going to happen next, who's going to up the ante. There's a lot of power plays that are happening. It's really spot-on acting. And then we see her meet up with her parole officer. And he has some demands on her and lets her know that he doesn't want to have a lot to do with her if she doesn't want his help. Again, this is another excellently acted two-person scene. There's a lot at stake. The parole officer does a great job of towing the line, letting her know where she stands in the world, what he can do for her if she will accept it. And we get to see how lost she is. This is the place where she has a lifeline, that she can get the kind of support and help she needs. And yet it seems she really doesn't want to be tied down to any kinds of rules. And being on parole, it's all about following the rules. Eventually, she does connect with her girlfriend, and she thought this was the person that she was going to be able to live with. Things had changed since she was in juvenile hall, and while Angel is understanding, she doesn't know how to really look out for herself. Feeling so rejected, she just goes off and does her own thing, tries to survive on her own, and ends up in a situation that is not what a parent would want to see a child get into, at the very least, in terms of having a place to sleep at night. The next day, she goes to visit her little sister, who is in foster care. And the foster care is not ideal. The children living in this foster home seem to some degree to be neglected. And this is where we see Angel's street smarts. She's able to ask her little sister key questions that help her understand what her sister's predicament is. She's actually quite motherly. She seems to be about 9 years older than her sister, and that is enough that she could take care of her. And in fact, she says once she gets her feet on the ground and is more settled, maybe she actually will be able to do that. But one thing that she does try to do is keep getting information about her father. She wants to find out where he is because she has the gun and she wants to seek some level of revenge on him. Nobody seems very willing to give her that address, and this includes her little sister. Her little sister says she can't give her the address, but she can show her where their father is. And she says that he is now near the ocean. And the ocean is a very special place for them. It is where they always spent birthdays. And also, at the very beginning of the film, there is voiceover with Angel speaking about what the waves and the sound of the ocean waves meant to her mother and how it was something that was soothing for her. Because Angel knows what she has in store for the father, she doesn't want her little sister coming with her. But she changes her mind because she has to figure out where the father is in the first place. So they set out on this expedition to go to the ocean. A few things happen along this journey, and the one that I'm going to speak about I think is a pretty important scene, and it's one to look out for in case you do see this movie. One thing that Abby, the little sister, has a knack for is making friends. She just seems to supernaturally be social with people, and they just like her right off the bat. So she meets a few girls on the bus that they are taking to the ocean and befriends them. And there's a point where they all get off at a bus stop, and Abby and Angel take a little bit too long at the rest stop, and they miss the bus. But the other girls are there because they live in that area, so they go with them to one of the girls' homes. Now, one of the girls in this group is a black girl, and so are Angel and Abby, and it is her home that they go to. This home is definitely in a wealthy neighborhood, and what this home looks like is a mansion compared to what Abby and Angel have experienced. There's a point where Angel gets to see this wall in the house that is just covered with pictures of this family. And it is such a great contrast to what the life is that she and Abby have. There's a lot of richness in this scene as we get to see the contrast between these lives. For the audience, it paints an amazing perspective. I know for me, it opened up this idea of what could be possible for Angel and Abby if their life had been so different, if they had still had their mother, if their father hadn't been charged with murder. And it was palpable to me how Angel and Abby felt in this home. I'm going to leave it to you to see the film to get the rest of the story. But what I will say is the questions continue to be asked around, is Angel going to change her ways? Is she going to connect more with her sister? Will she end up finding her father? And will she get the revenge that she thinks that she wants? In many ways, this is a gritty movie. It definitely deals with the shadow and the dark side. Another important factor in this movie is that Angel was released 2 days before her 18th birthday, and once she's 18, she is responsible for her own life going forward. So there's a question throughout the movie as to whether she is going to grow up enough and take responsibility enough for her life moving forward. The acting in this movie was riveting, so many places. I really believe these two young women were sisters. I felt Angel's character did an amazing job of coming across as a young, innocent young woman. But we know that her past shows that there's so much more to her than just what she appears on the outside. And she has a lot of anger. And it makes so much sense. Her father murdered her mother. This completely changed the course of her life and her sister's. But how she deals with that anger? Is she going to keep trying to get away with things? Does she want to go to prison where, in some regard, it might be a little bit safe? At least she won't have to provide for herself. She will be provided for. And yet, next time, because she'll be 18, it won't be juvenile hall. It will indeed be prison. And will she want a fate that may be similar to what her father's was? This movie asks a lot of questions, and I just loved how all the characters seemed to hold these histories so well. And they communicated well, and they had nuance. Each character had some unique characteristics. It was all very believable. Now, I will say there was a lot of swearing in this movie. And I guess that was realistic. I'm not so sure that it was realistic for Abby's character. Seeing as her older sister would swear a lot, it is not surprising that she'd at least want to take after her. There are moments also where we get to see the tremendous shame that is attached to these two young women as a result of the history of their family. What happened to their family was in the news. It was common knowledge among a lot of people. The information about their family could be found on the internet, and there's an incident where it is indeed. And this creates a desperate situation for Angel in particular, who feels super sensitive about this history. She's the older one, and she's the one with the true memory of what happened. The story that is told, the script, it's all very tight. I didn't find any holes in it. It's a profoundly sad story. Each scene is crafted really well. Most scenes are between two people, and you get to see them navigate the personalities. And all scenes do a great job of revealing information and have some kind of high stakes for each character. That is a lot to pull off, and I feel this film did it really well. Something that is interesting about this movie, I didn't have a big emotional response to it. I think I may have been pretty overwhelmed by all that was going on and all that was going on under the surface. It's like so much was going on for these characters' lives that they themselves were living life in somewhat of a daze. I would say most of my attention in this movie was around what was going to happen next. And I think it's incredible that this movie is under an hour and a half, because it felt like I had been dragged through these few days with Angel, these exhausting days as she's trying to figure life out. And she is at the pinnacle of the direction her life is going to go in next, based on the decisions that she's about to make. Unlike the more comedic movies that I watched for this podcast today, this is definitely a deep movie. It's also a serious movie. It deals with tough themes, from economic viability to racism, to mental health issues, to coming of age, to broken families. It just touches on so many important points. This movie had some similar themes to the movie Goldie, which I had reviewed in my July 21st podcast. So I would recommend this movie. Do keep in mind that there's a lot of hard stuff in this movie. And at the same time, I think maybe because it's done with younger people, there is also a kind of innocence that's connected to it that makes it a little more digestible. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a most excellent movie, for what this movie is setting out to achieve, I give it a 10. Considering this movie is just a handful of actors, and that Dominique Fishback is in just about every single scene, I think this movie is just really impressive. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the movies Work It, which I gave a 4, Gunjan Saxena, the Kargil Girl, which I gave a 10, The Sleepover, which I gave a 6, and Night Comes On, which I gave a 10. Here's to these films offering you some inspiration. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aaron, signing out. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review that really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.